I don't know what I'm going to do for the voiceover on this video. Even if this isn't the first time I'm narrating my cheap production, I still don't entirely feel confident in my speaking. It's making me as nervous as I get during presentations. I'm still insecure with my editing because there have been times where I've left editing mistakes in and only picked up on them after uploading. And the reason that this insecurity gets to me so much is because I know I'm capable of doing better while being unable to, because editing from a laptop with Premiere Pro is a nightmare, and unfortunately I still haven't figured out how to work around that other than to just do what my patience can manage. And it's going to stay that way until I receive my grades from my last term. The reason is that the last term was the final term of my bachelor program, which means until further notice, I'm patiently waiting to know whether or not I can graduate and begin my next life chapter. So while I wait, I'm just busying myself playing with recipes and experimenting with gluten-free and vegan bread making. It is pretty easygoing. It can be physically demanding because I'm always shopping, cooking, and cleaning. Sometimes that takes twice as long if I have a failed baking session, but being as passionate as I am about these experiments, I find more excitement and joy than exhaustion. The way that I cook and create is very improvised and seasonal, at least for the time being. That's why I never promise any recipes with measurements unless it's baking, and yet even that requires a revised version every now and then. In fact, I'm due to providing one from my rice bread in the future. Despite not changing the brand or type of rice that I use, I've had to learn that the slightest shift in the rice grain's nutritional value impacts the outcome of my bread. In other words, I'm trying to decide between switching rice grains or tweaking the recipe to bounce back from a few failed batches. I've spent some time downloading and reading research papers that compare rice grains from the grain size to the amylose content, and based on what I've learned so far, I'm leaning more towards changing rice grains because Japanese short grains that are grown and harvested in Japan might not be available commercially or are more likely to be found in specialty stores with premium prices. However, that doesn't mean that there is no access to affordable Japanese rice. We just might end up switching to crossbred grains such as Calrose rice, which are medium-sized grains and are grown in America, but they do have similar characteristics to the Japanese grown koshihikari.
コシヒカリ
The Calrose grains are a little less sticky than
コシヒカリ
but aren't so loose that they aren't usable in Japanese restaurants. In fact, Calrose rice is a suitable alternative to Japanese restaurants in the West and perhaps less traditional, but I'm sure that it is a nostalgic ingredient to American-born Asian households. If I'm wrong, I'm very open to be corrected. There is so much more that I want to say about rice and the science behind it, as well as my experience enjoying different grain sizes, but I think you can forgive me if I want to save that for a separate video, because now I want to talk about the contents of this video in particular. In the beginning footage, I was making some garlic confit to get rid of the excess stock I had. Normally, I go through garlic very quickly, but I'm only beginning to realize that I tend to restock just a few days before I have to travel, and that's why I always end up needing to cook and preserve them. The traveling occasion this time was to surprise my mom so that we could enjoy Turkey Day as well as catch up on my brother and my mother's birthdays. Surprisingly, I had a great short trip back and did much more than I thought I would. I thought that I was going to take it easy and just order my own food, but instead I had enough motivation to make it myself. The pictures don't do justice, really. But I made one eggplant pasta casserole and a Creole-inspired cornbread. I wanted to follow the recipe authentically, but in the middle of assembling the ingredients together, I forgot that I did not have any Creole seasoning at home. And it was such a bummer, but there was no way I was going to throw away my batch midway when I had a lot of ingredients that were from my trip back to the grocery store with my mom, and it was too special to discard. So how did the food turn out? A bit too healthy or too sweet for some? But that's because I kept the salt content relatively low for both dishes. I like the natural sweetness of the vegetables and I'm used to eating low sodium, so just a little bit of instant bouillon was already enough for me. I also had some salty toppings to contrast the flavors, so I'm assuming that some were digging into the contents of the food without the topping. But even though I was constantly being reminded that how I liked my food mattered more than what anyone else thought, it was still nice to share and receive some objective feedback. Festive dinner aside, the remaining days spent with the family were just full of love, joy, and celebrating everyone's personal achievements. I also didn't realize that during my visit, Vietnam was preparing for its first legal MMA event. We had a long-term family friend compete in the tournament and he took home the title, which was fantastic for him because he trained really hard. It was such an exciting accomplishment even if it might not compare to ONE FC and UFC. Vietnam previously did not allow such events and is still very inexperienced, but they're learning as they go. So despite some issues such as slippery mats and minor delays, everyone had fun, including my family and I, as we watched the live stream from Saigon, because the event itself was taking place in Phu Quoc. And since my visit was very short, I had to leave the next day to fly back to Singapore. It was too bad that I didn't have enough time to congratulate David personally like my family did, but the guy's going to be very busy now. Since he's received more offers and is also very passionate about his athletic career, he's actually in Thailand as we speak, training. I know. As for what waits for me career-wise, I might choose to hold a corporate job for income stability and continue to just draft out what direction I want this channel to take organically. I have not begun doing anything yet and I hesitate to overshare when I have not accomplished or stabilized my current life situation. So that's why I sound a little bit all over the place. And if you've made it this far in the video, thank you for your time and listening to me ramble about my uninteresting life. I mean, I love my life and I only imply that it is uninteresting because I know too many confident and successful people. And of course, next to them, I'm going to feel slightly out of place. But other than that, bye-bye. Hope everyone has a great one. Stay safe during the holidays. Whatever you do it safely and responsibly. I didn't think that I'd end up putting myself in a position where I'd have to speak as I film, but here I am. What I've got here is a piece of tofu that I fermented in miso, and it is called misozuke. What I did was I mixed some miso with my preferred seasonings and some sake, and then I marinated it. Well, I fermented it to be exact. What you see here is the paper towel that I wrapped the tofu in so that it could absorb any excess moisture, and the brown is the miso and sake seasoning that I coated the tofu in. It's been about a month, so let's take a look at the consistency. Oh my goodness, it's no longer firm. Really creamy, firm, because I used firm tofu, but not crumbly. That's really impressive. Oh wow, that's beautiful. I used yuzu as my additional seasoning of choice. Wow, that's impressive. Oh my goodness. And I didn't think I'd be able to do it